Okay, here we go. Hi, I'm John Green, and this is Crash Course American History AP style. We're going to steer away from parts of non-America and focus on our really true identity, which is, of course, America. Our identity is influenced by the many things going on from the country. Let's start with the original culture, the Native Americans. They had a continent all to themselves, divided into their own little tribes, like for example the Choctaw, the Creeks, the Apaches, and also the Cherokees, which all got along very well. Then came the Europeans, and the more southern regions of America. While many point out the Spanish Empire destroyed the culture of Native Americans in new forms of, like culture, worse from mixing off from the variety of namely best known as mestizo race. Then we came to the north, where racial mixing wasn't so much of a thing, unless you were, you guessed it, Canada. Then those from England arrived from, societies in the south like Jamestown, and in the north like the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Now those in the south moved due to economic reasoning, as they wanted to find gold for the Joint Stock Company, mainly known as the Virginia Company. On the other hand, those in the South found their identity in what they had faced religious persecution. And, like in Europe, and hoped to find their Protestant societies thrive in the New World. And you know what? They sure did. With their strict laws regarding church membership, lack of religious toleration, and the dislike of Native Americans. In fact, the colonies themselves would become somewhat untitled of their own conflicts within the Native Americans. In case of, for example, the Pequot War. So that's not to say that the Native Americans didn't try, but they did try to win, unless, the colonies during the King Philip's War too. Of course, things didn't work out too well for them, and, as the religious people of the northern colonies either killed the Native Americans for their converted ways of sinfulness, or tried to convert them into praying towns. Not only the Native Americans also faced prejudice throughout this time, but in addition to that, especially African Americans too, even in the southern colonies. Now after the French and Indian War, in the colonies what became even more united as they all went through being persecuted against by the, the British Parliament with the various taxes. Many colonies shared similar new ideals with not only the Great Awakening, but with new ideals of government from the Enlightenment. When the practices won their war against England, they will come across a new challenge in finding a new proper government. And while all of this political stuff was going on with the nation, Americans will be united by the first declared war of the United States, the War of 1812. Afterwards, Americans feel more confident that they have been able to defeat Great Britain yet again. So this part was going to unite them, but ultimately tear them apart in the century to come. Americans began to view themselves differently politically under the presidency of Andrew Jackson. Jackson appealed to the common man in America, having more from the modest backgrounds, and he supported common people's causes, the slavery, and the removal of Native Americans. That is very sad. There are plenty of changes with the nation's society going on at the time. First of all, some women in the country were reevaluating their given roles as wives and mother of Republican motherhood, and wanted more rights, You go, women. You support this. The movement of women's suffrage was joined by the movements of the battlement of prisons, asylums, temperance, and a wider distribution of, the public schools and better education. Of course, Americans have been moving since, to the west early in the days of the country, and the migration of settlers were strengthened by the American ideas of manifest destiny. Stand, not the road to the east, but to the beautiful west, like beaches and hot girls. You know what I'm talking about here. Anyway, so while the Louisiana Purchase from Napoleon had doubled the size of the nation, further attempts were made to secure land in the land further west like Texas, California, and Oregon. America was eventually able to gain these territories, while some Americans were bolstered by the ideas of moving west, since they could become rich with the gold rush of 1848, or with other means of self-discovery in the West. The Mexicans and African Americans did not feel the same way, because the country was at a dark division over what new territories would allow them slavery or not. As slaves were definitely being negatively affected by this sway. Why do you have to make me say this? This is so sad. I can't handle this. Oh, thank you, Random, for this tissue. Oh, thank you. But anyways, For example, the Compromise of 1850 much has solved these issues in the balance of the free and safe states for Congress, but at the same time, it contracted with the harsh fugitive slave laws. And this was the only one thing that began to divide the nation even further. Let's go to the thought bubble.
Since the beginnings of the nation, the North and the South have a lot of differences. They differ economically since the North had become increasingly reliant on paid wages, especially with the rise of industry and immigration. In the South, the grain economy was more focused on the plantation way of life with slavery. The South also tended to be against tariffs, which the North oftentimes supported, and this came to a very serious dilemma when the Tariff of Abominations was passed. South Carolina threatened to nullify the tariff, and Andrew Jackson sent in the military to enforce it. While the conflict was eventually settled by Henry Clay, yes, Stan, the great compromiser, the overall sectional conflict definitely wasn't. Things began heating up in none other than the newly established states of the West, which would be divided by the 3630 line as to which states would be slave states or not. However, the Kansas and Nebraska Act of 1854 went back on this when it allowed the free elections to determine whether these two states will be free or slave, and it got ugly. Especially because John Brown got involved, the same John Brown of the attempted Harper Ferry uprising.
Over the time, the Union saw this as being a battle for the abolition, rather than a war merely to keep the country together. And although African Americans gained freedom with the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment after the war, their rights as citizens were pretty much disregarded because of the failure of the Reconstruction and the implementation of Jim Crow laws. Well, we're going to skip a little part of history and move on to the topic of ethnic conflicts in Americans caused by immigrants. It is important to know that although the view of America today as a cultural diverse melting pot, it was not always like this. Before the 1800s, the majority of Americans have Anglo-Saxon ancestry. So when masses of immigrants came from other countries moved to America, Americans had a difficult time adjusting and adapting to these new changes. Like, for example, during the mid-1800s, there were a mass increase of immigration from Ireland, Eastern European, and also Germany. Well, in addition to that, there are many causes that made them move to change, especially in Ireland, was because of the potato famine that occurred in the year 1845. Yes, Stan, no more French fries for them. Haha. Other Europeans moved to America, the land of freedom and opportunities, in hopes of finding the new American dream, which we all know does not exist. They faced the struggles in America, like, for example, they had no jobs, nowhere to live, and many did not even speak the language, which is really sad, Stan. This is why when political machines like the also infamous Boss Tweed, you mean also Tweedering, comes into the picture, these political machines gives us new immigrants, food, shelter, and jobs. So Mr. Green, so these political machines are just acting out for the kindness from their hearts and not asking anything in return? Oh, me from the past, so naive and innocent. Of course they get some pay after this for helping the new immigrants to come here. For food, jobs, and shelter, the immigrants are expected to vote according to the political machines. The bosses took advantage of new immigrants to gain more political power in the government. With political machine bosses like Boss Tweed, like saying the way to have power to take it, it's no wonder why this is one of the most corrupt periods in American history, which is also known as the Gilded Age. Starting from the late 1800s, the wave of imperialism flowed from Europe to America. America started to intervene in international affairs. American imperialism in the climax got to its climax when it got itself involved in the Spanish-American War. Back home in America, people were divided on their support of the war. Some thought that the war was great for America since white and African-American soldiers were fighting side by side after, the great dispute during the Civil War. In addition to that, some worried that America is changing its identity as an isolationist country and is beginning to meddle into international affairs. They also believe that the U.S. government should not spend so much money improving foreign lands, such as the Philippines, but instead should spend this money here in the United States. Now America's involvement in World War I is a whole other story, since America joined the war way later on, but after the arrest action is already over. Again, most of the Americans did not support America going into this war. The government is much more successful at changing public opinion about this during this time. The Committee of Public Information led by George Creel gave thousands of public speeches and passed out brochures to gather support. Also, the striking of the Lusitania made enraged Americans into supporting America, joining the French and the British. Although America had, viewed themselves largely separated from the rest of the world, America inarguably became a part of the international political arena after World War I. At the beginning of World War II, America again had to try to remain neutral as we passed a series of Neutrality Acts of 1935, 1937, and 1939, which prevented America from getting involved by prohibiting the export of weapons from the U.S. to foreign other nations. But of course, America is just trying to lie itself and saying that it was nothing to do with the war. So the Neutrality Act of 1935 lifted the embargo on U.S. and even committed itself to adding the Allies through the Lend-Lease Act, lending, or another word for giving, weapons in the Allies' powers. However, that danger did not stay away from America for long. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, Congress for once finally agreed to something for once, in declaring war on Japan. The home front immediately focused on supplying American troops fighting in Europe. People seem to in high spirits. Everywhere people go to, there are posters, even propaganda to help support for this. Despite all of this, it is important to know that not all people agree that America should abandon its isolationist policies. Stannis, ready for the mystery document already? That's fast. Okay then. The rules here are simple. I read an excerpt from a document and I have to guess the author. If I get it right, I won't get shocked by the electrical pen. Let's go to the mystery document. Let's see what we got here for today. The primary foreign policy for the U.S. may be called for convenient continental Americanism. In concrete terms, the word means non-intervention in the controversies in wars of Europe and Asia and resistance to the intrusion of European or Asiatic powers, systems, and imperial ambitions into the Western Hemisphere. This policy is positive. It is clear-cut. So someone who prefers isolationism and opposes U.S. intervention in World War II. Oh, there are just so many. I'm going to have to take a wild guess on this one. Let's see. John T. Flynn? What? Wrong? It's Charles A. Beard? Sam, who in the world is that? Who has Beard on his last name? Oh, I don't want to do this. Another event that is extremely important to the transition of American society has to do with the African Americans' fight for civil rights. Of course, we all know about Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and the Montgomery bus boycott, So we are not going to go on to the details about that. The importance of how the inspirations moved to other people and other minorities throughout America. Like, for example, the African American Civil Rights Movement really Mexican Americans, Native Americans, and college students to fight for their cause, because the success of civil rights movement showed that they can obtain equality through peaceful demonstrations. Cesar Chavez was a famous leader of worker unions. Through boycotts and peaceful demonstrations, he brought in better working conditions for the Mexican Americans. In addition, Native Americans had their own protests in Natchitoches and Wounded Knee in South Dakota. The court decision United States versus Wheeler gave Native Americans unlimited sovereignty into their own settlement and reservations. As you can see, America's identity changed drastically over the years. From an isolationist fledgling nation to the world superpower we are today, we have come into a better, powerful nation. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.